Hey, why do people see me? I thought we were good. Should I just leave my video off or should I put the video on until I get off? Like, do you want there to be a black screen with just my name?
No, you should
Put the video on
until you get ready. Just try not to.
Good evening, everyone. We will convene shortly, waiting for Councilmember Aladamus. We heard from Councilmember Aladamus.
No, I will contact her right now.
Okay, thank you. Were you able to reach her?
Yes, she's logged in.
Oh, okay, very good. Should be seeing her momentarily then. Oh. I did just see her. There we go. Okay, very good. Right, we have the full council here on board. Call the meeting together. Joint City Council Fire Protection District Board meeting, the amended agenda for January 19th, 2021. I would like to share for the salute. Thank you. Hand over heart, please follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Miriam Abadamos.
Here.
Councilmember David Earl.
Here.
Councilmember Peter Washington.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mark Joseph.
Here.
Mayor Leon Garcia.
Here. We'll move now to report on closed session confirmation of reportable action. Mr. Ross.
Mr. Mayor, council members, you convened an open session at 5:33 p.m. to address the matters on closed session, which involved the city. With respect to the first matter on potential litigation, there was no reportable action under the common law attorney-client privilege, and that provided by Government Code Section 54-956.9 D2. With respect to the second matter, retention of special legal counsel, and there was no reportable action, and the matter will come back for your meeting of February 2nd. There is no reportable action under the provisions of Government Code Section 54-957 B4. You concluded the closed session at 6:32 p.m. That would conclude the report upon return from closed session, unless there are questions.
Any questions from council? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Ross. City Clerk, announcement related to teleconference participants.
Thank you for joining us for the January 19th, 2021 City of American Canyon City Council meeting. This meeting is being held entirely virtually in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The format tonight will be similar to that of an in-person City Council meeting. In addition to the Zoom platform, the meeting is being broadcast on cable TV, Channel 28, on YouTube, and streamed live on the city's website. You will see the City Council members on your screen, along with members of city staff. All members of the public will participate in a listen-only mode. Public comment is invited for non-agenda items during the public forum section of the meeting on each agenda item. When the item you wish to speak on is called, please follow these steps to make your comments. When the mayor calls a particular item and you wish to speak on that item, click the raise hand button if joining by computer. If joining by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. When it's your turn, I will announce your name and invite you to speak. You may see a message saying the host would like you to unmute your microphone. If you get this message, click unmute myself and begin speaking. To unmute yourself by phone, dial *6 and begin speaking. Video will not be turned on, only the audio. You have up to 3 minutes to make your comments to the City Council. At the end of your 3 minutes, I will ask you to conclude your comments quickly, and I will mute your audio once you're done. Please press only *9 to raise your hand for the items you wish to speak on, as the raised hands will be cleared at the end of each item. The agenda for this meeting is available on the City's Council page of the city's website. As in the standard practice, community members are allowed to comment one time on each agenda item. All votes at tonight's meeting will be taken by roll call. We ask your patience and understanding when there are technical difficulties. This concludes my introductory remarks.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, there's something that I would like to clarify for members of our community. We've received a few, thank you. We've received a few public comments via email that say that they are requesting that those emails be read into the record. Will we be reading those into the record per the resident's request or not?
No, Councilmember Abadamas, as we show at the top of the agenda on page 1, emails are not going to be read aloud. The council has been provided copies of those emails, and we've also communicated to each of those folks who emailed us and let them know what our process is, reminding them what page 1 of the agenda says. So we've given the written copies to the council. They will be incorporated into the record of this meeting, so that in the future, when people go back and look at what items were part of the record for this meeting, those written copies are going to be included there, but we will not be reading verbatim the written emails that were sent to us.
So for me, sometimes a public comment helps stimulate another public comment. So my preference would be to go ahead and read them into the record, especially since that's what the resident requested. But that's just me. I know I'm one of 5.
Well, I would agree. I think at a minimum, to the extent that we're receiving them now, I literally am looking at some of the public comments. I know I'm not getting the benefit of their perspective. And at a minimum, allowing them to summarize their comments verbally may make some sense as well. That way, they get to make their point and everyone else can hear, and that may, as Councilmember Abadama said, stimulate some of the points. And that applies not just to the item that's generating the most reactions. There's been comments on the MBTA item, as well as term limits, as well as noisy dogs. So
sure, all residents have been notified. All those that sent emails have been notified that if they want to make oral comments to the council, they can. They've been given the methodology to do that, the phone number, et cetera, to do that. So we encourage all of our residents who would be interested in making an oral comment to the council to call the phone number and to be set up to be able to do that.
So I've said this before, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have read emails into the record. And my hope is for more inclusion. And so my preference is still to read those into the record.
I think there's the opportunity for the public to verbally read those into the record. I think what I'm understanding is it seems like we have, correct me if I need to be, that the legal requirement can submit a comment for the record, or the individual can voice their opinion verbally. So we're reading both. Okay.
And also for the public, on the agenda, the city council agenda, on the first page of the agenda, it also mentioned that emails will not be read aloud. I just wanted to point that out, that it is listed on our agenda.
I see that, and I'm willing to guarantee you that the bulk of all of that small print is, like Brent would say, too much, a lot of words, and probably got skipped over, which is why we still are receiving emails that are requesting to be read into the record.
Well, they can certainly have the opportunity for public comment. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes, we encourage all those who submitted written comments in advance of the meeting to call the phone number that's listed on the agenda to call and if they choose to make those same comments or other comments to the council.
Okay. So we're meeting our legal requirements. Very good.
Correct.
And
Shall we
Mr.
move on?
Member, in case you do not have the agenda in front of you, please dial 408-638-0968. Once you enter into the call, the webinar ID is 999-7860-8257. Again, the webinar ID is 999-7860-8257. And the passcode is 306636. Again, the passcode is 306636.
Thank you. Okay, moving on with our agenda. We're ready. City Clerk announcement pursuant to Government Code 54952.3. It is as stated in the agenda. Moving on to proclamations and presentations. Oh, we're very pleased this evening to administer the oath of office to Open Space Advisory Board member Scott Artis. Here we have Mr.
Hi,
Artis.
Scott.
Hello. It is okay. City Clerk, proceed, please.
Hi, Scott. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Scott Artis,
I, Scott Artis,
Open Space Advisory Committee member,
Open Space Advisory Committee member,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution
that I will support and defend the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well
and that I will well
and faithfully discharge the duties
and faithfully discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Mr. Scott Artis. Look forward to your service for the community.
And I look forward to working with everybody in the community as well.
Appreciate your knowledge in this area and for the betterment of American Canyon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on now to public comments. Anybody public comment on agenda items at this time?
We have one from Jason Kishnoff.
There we go.
Hi, Jason.
Hello.
Mr. Kishner, welcome.
Thank you. It doesn't look like my video caught up. Do you see me?
No, it looked like something looks like a vest.
Okay. Doesn't matter. I'm going to go anyway so I don't waste everybody's time. I have a neighbor with a dog that barks all day long. If I'm trying to focus on writing something, it can be very annoying. I thought about saying something to my neighbor, but they have every right to have a dog, and you can't blame a dog for following its doggy instincts. Then I remembered a couple of months ago, this council decided to require cannabis growers to purchase expensive ventilation systems. So why can't we also require that dog owners invest in soundproofing their homes? It wouldn't work for yards, but if the city's going to pass ordinances that discriminate against the poor just to protect people from a smell, then the city must also be willing to protect people from irritating noises, right? I mean, this is a lot more bothersome than a smell. So I pointed out at the time that requiring ventilation systems was illegal and unconstitutional, but this council passed the ordinance anyway, saying it was an enforcement mechanism, which really means that if the government really wants to get somebody and they can't prove any other violation of law, they will use this as a reason to give them a ticket or arrest them, even though it's unconstitutional and will fail at the first time it's challenged in court. So why can't we do the same with soundproofing? Let's place it in the ordinance, even though it's not legal and it's totally unethical, so we can arrest people that we don't like because we can hear their dogs. Because that's wrong. That's not the way government works. You can't just make laws that you know are illegal without the plan to, with the plan to only use them as an enforcement mechanism to get people you don't like. You can't make a law that discriminates against poor people, and you can't put unfair restrictions on Prop 64. As a government that is laying traps to trick people, to use against people when you want to, it's not working for the people, it's working against them. And for the record, I love dogs and I love all animals. I'm sorry I had to use them as an example. I didn't mean to offend anybody. No dogs were harmed in the making of this public comment. Thank you.
Any other comments from the city clerk?
I believe Cindy Biederman is trying to log in. She's having issues logging in.
We'll give her a moment. Is there anything on the, these are not an agenda item, public comments?
There are public comments. There was a public comment received on business item C1 from Tammy Wong.
That will be taken up when we get to that.
And I'll be taking that when we get there. And so Cindy is now logged in. So I'll bring her into the meeting.
Okay. There we go. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. Happy 2021.
Thank you.
So I was, you know, I should be an expert at these Zoom things, right? Especially being a distant learner with my kids, my grandkids. So you think I'd be able to learn how to split screen and everything else, but I'm still having troubles. So this is a public comment. As you guys know, I submitted in a comment for agenda item C3. And I get what you guys are saying, you know, now all of a sudden we can't have these read. But honestly, it's feeling like we're kind of getting, our voices are getting squished a little bit. Being is, this agenda item is probably going to be late tonight. We have children that go to school. This is one reason why I submitted my statement in, and I did ask for it to be read, because the last time, which was not too long ago, I submitted a statement in for comment, general comment, and you guys told me that you guys would not read general comments. But listening and finishing the rest of the meeting, you guys read agendized topic comments from people. So is this like something that keeps changing? Is this, you know, ongoing? Which I know you can't talk back because this is not an agenda topic either, but you guys are, you know, it looks like it's convenient for you guys, but it's really not convenient for the community members. So I just wanted to put that out there. You know, life is hard enough, as you guys know. I'm asking you guys not to make it that much harder. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. You guys have a great night.
Good. Any other speakers for public comment?
There are no other comments.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll close public comment at this time. On to agenda changes. Mr. Ross, you have an item.
Yes, city staff recommends under the provisions of Government Code Section 54954.2B2 and 54956.5 that a matter be added as consent item B8. The matter would be entitled Consideration of Adoption of a Resolution Approving Amendment NO number 12 to the Joint Powers Authority Agreement between the City of American Canyon and the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. The need to take this action arose because the NVTA meets tomorrow, January 20th, 2021, to consider the referenced Joint Power Authority Agreement amendment and cannot do so without the city approval. The agenda amendment requires a motion and a 2/3 vote approval of your council, which would be by roll call. So the staff recommendation would be for that addition as agenda item consent B8, and it does appear on the amended agenda as it's published.
Is there a motion to approve this for consent item?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion second, roll call, please.
Councilmember Miriam Abadamos,
Yes.
Councilmember David Oro, Councilmember Peter Washington,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mark Joseph,
Yes.
Mayor Leon Garcia.
Yes. Did you hear Councilman Oro's vote? He's muted. You're muted.
I was talking to myself, looking at the agenda. So yes to the motion
Okay, very good.
and the vote. So,
All right.
We also have Kate Miller here as a panelist.
Very good. Welcome, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Thank you so much. It means really a lot for the council to show such great partnership in this project. And I wanted to just also acknowledge Jason Hawley and staff for supporting this. It's really going to help us get this project started and is going to provide much better service for the community in the future. And so I just wanted to acknowledge you for that vote and thanks again.
Thanks,
Thank
Kate.
you.
We were just adding the item under B8. We haven't actually got to this item yet. So we'll be there in
sorry.
one moment, though. We'll be there in one moment. We got to do the
We'll be there.
consent first.
Yeah. Stay with us for a while.
Did you record that? Then we can just play it back.
Very good. Okay, now we'll move on to matters related to American Canyon Fire Protection District Board consent calendar from the ACFPD. Motion to approve or an item to be pulled?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to pull both of those items actually from consent.
Okay. And there's only two items, so Councilmember Alvarez will take up item one, adopt a resolution authorizing the fire district members to designate a City of American Canyon official to deposit or withdraw funds from local agency investment fund.
I believe that we can take both matters at the same time because my comments are identical. I already spoke with Chief Cahill and Bill Ross. My concern is the city and the fire district are two distinct entities, and the new resolutions that give authority to, well, they're kind of inconsistent, right? The staff report says that the authority is granted to the city manager, assistant city manager, finance director, treasurer, and finance manager, and all of their successors, or all of their successors. But the resolution itself provides the authority, provides the authority to the mayor and to the finance director, and the other one provides it to the chief, the finance director, and the finance manager. So there's the inconsistency, and number two, I don't see anything in here that clarifies that money can only be deposited or withdrawn with the consent of the chief, who's the CEO of the organization. And I want that clarification to be there. It would make me more comfortable because, like I said, they are two distinct entities, and these resolutions are giving authority to city staff to withdraw or deposit funds out of the fire protection district bank account.
Your understanding is the fiduciary for the fire district, though, is city staff. That's why they're in that. Have I got that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Mayor, and can chime in here a little bit, and certainly Mike can chime in as well. This item, the way that it's set up, first of all, I understand how there's some confusion based on the language of the staff report and the resolution. There are existing resolutions that give, the resolution is meant to capture only those individuals who do not yet already have authorization. The council previously, and I don't have the prior resolutions in front of me, but previously, in this case, the fire board had already authorized, for example, myself, Assistant City Manager Maria Ojeda, and others under prior resolutions, that authority for investments and investments of monies in LAIF. And so the staff report is more globally speaking about all of the individuals who may be authorized, but the resolution itself is getting to the heart of only those individuals who don't already have that authority. And so there are prior resolutions that give myself that authority. There are prior resolutions that give Assistant City Manager Ojeda that authority. And so I get why there's confusion because the staff report kind of lists this big long group and the resolution has a smaller group, but that's the reason for, as you labeled it, inconsistency. And secondarily, as the fiduciary, the city is the fiduciary of the fire district. And so by that very means, we are doing everything in our power to look out for the best interests of the district. And so we routinely use LAIF kind of as a checking account or as a savings account. We make transfers, deposits and transfers back and forth from LAIF on a very regular basis. And so those transactions relate to payroll, they relate to a variety of transactions, and they don't involve consultation with the fire chief each time, because in our role as fiduciary, we're expected to have that highest standard. But I certainly want to let Chief Cahill also share his perspective.
Chief Cahill.
Thank you, Chairman Garcia and board. I did talk with board member Abadamas this afternoon, and we discussed the issue with regards to having the fire chief have the ultimate say in his response as the chief executive officer to the fire district, and I understand where she's coming from and agree with that. I also did not totally understand the fiduciary capacity in which the city and the district board, the city and district staff are functioning. Given the fact that the fire district does not have its own financial department, and we do rely on the city to provide our fiduciary functions, I think what best needs to happen here is essentially just we need to make sure that the city staff have the authority to be able to deal with the fire district's funding and to get the business of that taken care of routinely. I know I spoke with Miss Manuelos this afternoon after talking to Miriam, and there have been in the past circumstances where the fire chief was not available to be in consult with the city staff when those kinds of things are done, and so that was one of the reasons for the moves that were made with having the city manager and the assistant city manager involved in the process. Again, this is another piece of the grayness, I guess the best way to put it, in terms of the relationship between the fire district and the city. From the outside, it's, we want it to be totally transparent, but from the inside, it also has to work. So I guess I'll stop there.
And I believe that it can work and be transparent at the same time. But for me personally, although the city is a fiduciary, for me personally, I would be more comfortable if there was some sort of clarification in the language, because the way that it's stated right now in the staff report is the proposed resolution grants authority to the city manager, assistant city manager, finance director, and finance manager to initiate banking related transactions with West America Bank, and it says the same thing for LAIF. I think it would be more transparent if the chief was involved in that. Like, I understand the fiduciary relationship, and so what I'm about to say doesn't 100% make sense, but this is where I'm coming from. The chief doesn't get to withdraw money from the city bank account because they're separate entities. And although the city has the fire protection district's best interest at heart, the whole fiduciary duty thing, I think it would just create more transparency to include somehow consent by the chief or consent by the fire district board or some sort of consent in there. That would make me more comfortable. And I feel like that would be, or I believe that would make it more transparent and it could work.
Can I offer a suggestion?
Okay.
I think I understand the intent of the board member, and I think I can modify ministerially. What's important is the resolution, right? And Jason's correct. It amends prior resolutions that authorize city officials on behalf of the fire district. I think, to make it perfectly clear, I can modify ministerially if you so direct me, paragraph 2 of each resolution to include reference to the effect with the concurrence of the district chief or his delegee, so that the intent raised by board member Amendamus would be set forth.
And that probably has some merit. I was going to suggest we include an additional whereas, just clarifying that fiduciary role of the city vis-a-vis the district, because I think that needs to be clarified. Procedurally, what's been described actually happens. The only other point I'd make as a ex-finance director who's dealt with banks, they usually don't like, they like one resolution that says, here's everybody who's listed. And having to work with the original resolution and this extra, they're usually going to pick one or the other, and periodically you're going to get a note that says, I'm sorry, you're not authorized, and then you've got to come up with the other one. So if we're going to amend the resolution, I'd also suggest that we just list everybody in the resolution, just because it's a lot cleaner and easier, and it'll be a nice template for the next time.
Straightforward, yeah.
I like both of the recommendations, the one that was recommended by Bill Ross and the two that were recommended by Vice Mayor Mark Joseph. I think it would, especially if it's already happening in practice, we're talking about transparency, so let's put it in writing.
Yeah, happening in practice is something that I'm going to need to go and discuss with staff. I need to have a better understanding about what the daily or weekly transactions might be. At this point, if this is this is something that's a concern about changing how the city operates as a fiduciary, the city is going to need to go back and understand how it can do that, trying to meet the intent of the board. It's clear to me what the intent is, what's being offered by the district council, but at this point, I need to circle back with our team and understand what are the real world implications of us having to have that consultation, and what does that consultation look like? We're operating in a fairly real time environment. People coming and going, people out sick sometimes. For payroll, if we need to transfer something, are we going to have to delay a payroll for some reason because we have to transfer something back in from LAIF? These transactions can happen often. Often things come up, is what I'm saying, and I'm going to need to get down into the nitty gritty with our team. And I do appreciate the comment from Vice Chair Joseph about having a clean resolution with all the individuals. I think that's something that we can certainly clarify. But as far as process, I'm not comfortable right now saying understanding how the city's day-to-day process might change, and that's something we're going to need to do. So.
You need time to work on this then?
Yeah, we would. And also, Jason, I just want to clarify that by consent from the fire chief, I don't mean it has to be something formal per se, maybe an email or a text message if the chief is unavailable immediately to sign documents, but you also have to look at the converse, right? So the way that it's written, basically you can go buy something for whatever your max limit is without the chief knowing about it, and it could, 5 city managers from now, it could be something completely unrelated to the fire protection district, but that authority is there in writing. So what are we going to do about it? Do you see what I'm saying?
I understand your point, and quite honestly, what it brings up, and Mike touched on it, is this notion of the gray area. There are, at least to my understanding, there's not really an operating agreement between the city and the fire district as to how that might happen. What would the recourse of the district be against a city employee who might do that? How might that relationship work? As a city manager of the city council, I'm beholden to the agreement that I have with you and the behavior and the conduct that is in that agreement. And so it's not to say I could do that and there be a lack of recourse. But the city council has entrusted me with a very large fiduciary responsibility for the city operations, and the fire district has asked the city, albeit informally, to provide that same level of fiduciary to the fire district, as opposed to employing its own financial experts to do that at a cost saving. So, is it possible? Certainly, but again, there are lots of checks and balances out there. But it does bring up a much bigger topic around that gray area.
I think that can all be worked out unless there's some particular urgency. It seems like the smart answer is we should continue this item and take our comments and integrate it into a better package on the next agenda.
That's a quick question. I got to turn to Assistant City Manager Maria. I don't know what the real world implications of delaying to Feb 2 are, and I don't mean to cut you off, Mike. So certainly.
That's okay. No, it's fine.
So the main purpose of this is to actually allow the people who are listed in the resolution to transact. Should the council choose to delay this item, we won't be able to have that occur. And so I recognize the same points that you've covered earlier, but this is really more transactional in nature in terms of continuing business transactions as they've continued to occur all this time. So given that there's additional feedback being received now, my recommendation would be we approve the resolution to continue to have city transactions and business as it has been occurring, and then we can come back and look at these items that you've brought up. The other thing is when it has to do with, like, for example, purchases and things like that, we the city, have a process for purchases that has signatures and approvals that go through the fire department. So the city, for example, would not make purchases on behalf of the fire department or use fire department funds. Just to address that as an example.
And I'd like to, if I could, Chairman Garcia, I'd like to just back that up. That is how the system that is in place today works, and it works great. We don't want to stop the wheels of finance at the fire district level in terms of paying our bills and our employees.
Yeah, you got to get bills paid, and we need to address some of the concerns raised around.
Yeah, what I would ask is that that I can get together, circle around, and get together with the assistant city manager and the city manager and the finance director, and we'll work this out. I think we can address Miriam's issues and still make all this work. So if the chair would allow that would be my suggestion.
So I don't understand. So if we don't approve the resolution tonight, I don't understand how that would impede progress, because we're not removing anyone who already has the authority, and bills have been getting paid without this resolution. So I don't see the urgency in approving it tonight. And it sounds like if this is already what's happening in practice and the fire department already has to sign anything purchased on their behalf, then it shouldn't be a big issue.
This is actually to move funds so imagine having two checking accounts. One is for your expenses and one is your savings, where you make a little more interest on your money. So this is so that we can manage those funds a little bit better and get a little bit more return on the funds that we have operating. And this is to add the individuals that are listed in the resolution as signatories, because we have new staff. And when we've had transition of staff, many of the signatures have been, for example, for me instead of the finance director. And so we're just trying to add more authority. As an example, a while back we had some staff that was out ill, and it delayed a little bit our ability to get a transfer done. So it's really in the city's best interest to have the layers and levels, so that if someone's unavailable, we're able to make those transactions and those transfers. Just keep business operating.
Which I understand, but I also believe that it's in the city's best interest to be transparent, and I don't see that a 2-week delay is going to mess anything up.
I'm sure we can live with February 2. And again, this isn't related to the city matter. So the fire district, I'm sure that with the existing authorities, the city can figure out how to act as a fiduciary until February 2nd for fire district stuff. And it's just how we're going to perform that service for the fire district. I'm sure we can figure out, again, with my existing authority and the assistant city manager's existing authority. Meanwhile, Chief Cahill, myself, and the city manager will sit down with our finance team and figure out how to better clarify those pieces so that the district board is comfortable with the service the city is providing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Motion to continue it, or?
Is there a motion to continue this? What is the desire of the board?
I'll make a motion, we continue it to the next meeting.
I'll second.
Motion second, roll call, please.
Board Member Miriam Abadamos.
Yes.
Board Member David Orrell.
Yes.
Board Member Pierre Washington.
Yes.
Vice Chair Mark Joseph.
Yes.
Chair Leon Garcia.
Yes. Thank you, board members. On with our agenda now. Matters relating to American Canyon City Council consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve or items to be pulled?
I'll wait, and if anybody wants to pull, otherwise, I'll make a motion. We approve the consent calendar, including BA relating to the NVTA Joint Powers Agreement Amendment.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Miriam Abodamos.
Yes.
Councilmember David Oro.
Yes.
Councilmember Pierre Washington.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mark Joseph.
Yes.
Mayor Leon Garcia.
Yes. Thank you, council. Moving on now to business, item C1. Adopt a resolution approving Napa Valley Transportation Authority request for a waiver of water capacity fee consistent with the American Canyon Municipal Code, section 13-06-110.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and welcome back, Kate, to your item. With us, we have Executive Director of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, Kate Miller, and I'll be presenting this item, and I know that Kate will also have some thoughts. She kind of shared them a little bit earlier. In short, the city collects impact fees from developers related to infrastructure that's needed for their new development, and we use those impact fees to pay for new development, new capacity in the system. And our water service area is much broader than our municipal limits. It includes areas in and around the Napa Valley Airport, and it includes a currently vacant property that the Napa Valley Transportation Authority is going to be constructing a new maintenance facility. And Napa Valley Transportation provides a transit service countywide, and residents of American Canyon enjoy that service, as well as residents all over the county. In particular, residents of American Canyon use this to commute to BARD and to other places, and to employment in both north of us and south of us. And it's a public agency. Two of our council members are members of the board of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. And our municipal code has provisions where we can waive these impact fees for new development. And under our current processes, this project, although it's being conducted by a local government agency, would be considered new development and would be assessed a new capacity fee for the water system. They are not connected to our sewer system. They're only going to be connected to our water system. We've been working with staff at NVTA and their team for a while now on this project, and they're doing really a commendable job on the water resource side for this project. They have made their project as water efficient as possible. And for example, the water that they use to wash the buses will be recycled water. They're not using sparkling, clean, potable water for that purpose. But at the end of the day, they will have new employees. New employees will have potable water needs, and they've designed their project to integrate with our system. I think the other important point is we don't really see any site-specific capacity issues. There's not new pipelines that are needed or bigger pipelines that are needed. The system is all ready for any kind of development to hook up here. And so I think that's an important point. If we're going to be looking at, waiving these fees, we want to make sure there's not, new improvements, particularly right nearby that would be needed to be paid for with those fees. In talking with NVTA, we let them know that there was this possibility available, and they've submitted a letter from the chair of the board requesting to waive the city's water capacity fee, and staff recommends that. I'll let Kate maybe talk a little bit about the funding of this project and why some of the challenges and some of the piecemealing and cobbling together that you reference in the letter.
Sure. So thank you, Jason. So this is a very extensive facility. It has 6 bays. It has a modern bus wash system. It also has administrative facilities and a regional meeting facility, as well as a backup emergency response facility. At some point, we hope to expand the facility on the adjacent property that we also acquired to do highway operations, which I think everybody in American Canyon would really appreciate. But the project is a $32 million construction project, and we had anticipated getting Regional Measure 3 funds for this, but as you know, Regional Measure 3 is tied up in litigation. So in order to minimize the escalation costs on the construction, MBTA is moving forward with financing, and it's extensive financing where we will be borrowing about $20 million from the federal government under the TIFIA program, and then the balance will be funded through local funds that we've acquired and have been banking. And then we also now have to pursue about $5 million in private financing. So it's a very expensive project, but delaying it doesn't make sense. The project is going to really make our system much more efficient. I know that our two board members know that we're operating in a very small, somewhat antiquated and dilapidated facility that was inherited by the city over 20 years ago. And very little improvements have been made on it, anticipating that we would at some point move to a new facility. The city would like it back because they'd rather use it for redevelopment. It's an essential part of their priority development area. And it's just also, it was meant for a much smaller system. We have consolidated all of the small transit systems in the small cities of the valley, and we also expanded with our express bus service. So it simply doesn't have the capacity to service anymore. So we really appreciate the city considering waiving these fees. I think it would be really helpful. It also unfortunately was not anticipated, and I guess we didn't do our homework, and so anything that the council could do to help us in that regard would be very much appreciated.
Thank you. Speaking as Vice Mayor Joseph and I are both board members of ETA representing American Canyon. This project has been long needed in the area. As Ms. Miller describes it, the existing lot is just too small and will not provide for expedient growth and quality of service that we expect with transit. I think for me, the reflection is this is a benefit to us as a community. So we have an investment here for the service for our community members who ride the bus every day. Frankly, I think they have some, my best ride has been, if you want to get to the San Francisco airport, you get on the bus here in American Canyon that takes you to BART, and you get on BART and with one transfer. When you get down at San Francisco airport, it's just a short walk from where you are to the airline terminal. I mean, you can't beat that. You just don't have all the traffic. And I look forward for more service like that from MBTA, and I know we have our challenge being a rural serving district. But anything that we can do to help this along is going to be able to improve service. And with that comes improved ridership as well. I'm hopeful for that. Of course, then your monthly water bill, you still got to pay. But hopefully there's a lot of recycled water being used. There's some very creative engineering going on with that. Yes, Councilmember Joseph.
Yes, and if I can add to that, we did receive a public comment basically expressing the concerns that $140,000 could be used for a lot of things in American Canyon. I think we should be clear that this is a connection fee in which it is earmarked. All it could be used for is water capacity, pipelines, tanks, those kinds of things. And as the city manager indicated, there are no immediate needs for that in the area. On the other hand, if we don't find revenues for the maintenance facility, there's a very real possibility that at some point the NBTA board will be considering the use of funds that could be used for road projects or the maintenance facility. And so ironically, there's a greater risk that we may not benefit from some of the dollars out there for road projects because we are earmarking it for the maintenance facility because we're requiring them to pay a capacity fee that we don't have any immediate infrastructure need for. So granted, that's a convoluted thing in which maybe the finance director is the only person who understood what I was saying. But the bottom line is I think there's merit to going ahead and waiving this fee. It isn't required for our immediate needs, and it will help a project that is important, and it will benefit a lot of our community. Thank you.
Any other comment on that? Did we see any comment on this from the public? Vice Chair
We
Joseph.
received one public comment which council have, and it was from Tammy Wong.
Okay. Any public comment requested on this?
There are two attendees. Justin, if you wish to speak, which he did, he raised his hand, so invite him in. And we have Karina Savante.
Okay.
Hi, Justin. Justin?
Hi, did I hear me?
Yes, good evening. Welcome.
Oh, this is new for me. Thank you. You know, Kate is so working hard on this in the Highway 29 door. I'm so glad we get this new transportation bus barn. My question is that Shako Junction is coming in first. So, Kay, this is for you. Great job on this, and I'll see you tomorrow. See you to January 25th. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Anybody
else?
No.
Okay, very good. What's the desired action of the council then? Is there a motion to approve?
No other comment. I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 2021 next in order, a resolution of the City Council of the City of American Canyon adopting a resolution approving the Napa Valley Transportation Authority's request for a waiver of water capacity fee consistent with American Canyon Municipal Code section 13.06.110.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Miriam Abadamos?
Yes.
Councilmember David Oro?
No.
Councilmember Pierre Washington?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mark Joseph?
Yes.
Chair Leon?
Yes.
Garcia, sorry.
Yes.
Just wanted on
Mayor
behalf
Leon Garcia.
to thank you for that vote. It really means a lot to us.
We'll see you tomorrow. Okay, now item C2, receive and file an update of the city's financial position due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'll be going through the financial update for the general fund during this city council meeting, covering the results for fiscal year 1920, as well as where we're at in fiscal year 2021. So let me pull up my screen here. I didn't share yet. We ended up doing better than anticipated for fiscal 1920. The city's general fund had an unaudited budget or shortfall compared to budget, or for actuals of $18,351. This is far better than was originally anticipated throughout the budgeting process throughout the year. The chart at the bottom of this slide shows that the original adopted budget expected a shortfall of close to $1 million at $938,000. And the shortfall would therefore be covered by existing fund balances. In March of 20, when we did the mid-year budget adjustments, we were just coming into the pandemic, and we revised the budget estimates. It was thought that the use of fund balance or the shortfall was going to be closer to $1.25 million. And then in June, there was still a lot of uncertainty as to where we were going to end up, and that projection grew again to almost 1.4 million. As it turned out, we had some one-time revenues, and sales tax performed better than expected. Property taxes came in where they were projected. So a lot of our major revenue sources came in, and the expenditures also came in less than expected. So that allowed us to close that gap and really come in near break even for fiscal 1920. This chart shows revenues and expenditures in graph format. The first number on the left is the adopted budget. The gray is the expenditures and the orange is the revenues. So that gap between those was the projected shortfall. The middle item was the mid-year adjustment, and then the third number over where we expected to end in June and compared to where we actually ended up. Summarized differently, the shortfall is the yellow at the bottom here, and you can see that that was growing throughout the year and came down. Our beginning fund balance in 1920 was $10,359,000. It had been thought to potentially drop below 9 million at one point during the year due to COVID, but we're ending near 10,341,000. Again, this is unaudited. We expect to get our opinion in the next few weeks, and we don't expect any material changes between now and then. The general fund year-end revenues for 1920 ended 287,000 higher than was expected in June, coming in slightly over 20 million. The property tax came in slightly lower than expectations, but only by about $30,000, $40,000. Sales tax, however, performed better than expected, coming in at 2.46 million versus a projection of 1.9 million. So that is another 500,000 that was used to offset the impact of the coronavirus. Transient occupancy tax also performed slightly better than anticipated. We had reduced to 1.1 million and it came in at 1.14. So again, close to break even, but not quite as bad as we had anticipated. The expenditures for the general fund ended lower than expected, also coming in just over 20 million versus an expectation of coming in over 21 million. Salaries and benefits were lower than expected by about $350,000, $400,000. Pension and OPEB expenditures came in as expected. Generally, for pension, we pay the bulk of it at the beginning of the year, and then it's trued up the next year. Supplies and services were lower than expected. This is another area that we're going to look forward to in the next budget process to try and see if there's areas where we can work to not grow the supplies and services expenditures. They were budgeted at 11.3 million and came in at about 10.94 million. So that's like a $300,000 savings to help close the gap in that expected shortfall as well. Also, the internal service fees and the maintenance and utilities came in lower than expected. So this page here goes through and shows a breakdown of the categories and what the adopted budget was, the amended, the estimated at June of 2020, and then our unaudited actuals. The furthest column on the right shows the change from the June estimate. And at the bottom, it shows our cash balance. So we've kind of gone over a lot of the major ones in here to talk about where the increases and decreases were. This is more of a summary form. Any questions on last fiscal year?
This was the item that Vice Mayor Joseph and I attended as part of the Finance Committee. So we've had some discussion on preliminary to this as well. But opportunity now for council members to weigh in. Let's see, we're in a better state. I just reiterate some of the comments from Finance Committee. Sounds like we have some one-time money that came in. And as we all know, one-time money is one time. We just go out there and see if we can find that again to help balance the budget. We had a lot of decrease in expenditures. A lot of that was due to the budget activity we took with the city. To comment, Mr. Bogart, regarding how much for example, we have furlough days for staff, and that would not be in a normal year.
Right, that, as far as I understand, started in July, so that is in this coming year's analysis that we're looking at.
Okay.
Just a question on the internal service fees. I remember when we were going through and balancing the budget last year, we decided to waive some of the fleet fees. And I'm wondering, was the $700,000 that was budgeted for internal service fees, was that the original amount? And even though we decided not to charge, we didn't adjust the budget? I guess I'm wondering how we could have only spent half of what was budgeted for internal service fees when we had already significantly cut it, if that makes sense. And I recognize that our finance director wasn't here there, so it's not as easy for him to explain something that he had no knowledge of. But
yeah, that's a good question, Vice Mayor Joseph, and we'll have to go back and dig into that and answer your question. I think it's fair to say I recall the exact same conversation. I don't know if we still had a budget that had those higher amounts of internal services, or we did go through a number of iterations, and so it's possible that we ended up still with a little bit higher budget number, even though the final iteration might have had a lower number. So that's possible. We can dig into that question and provide some additional feedback to the council.
okay, because like I said earlier, I recognize there was all kinds of scrambling going on, not just because of the COVID and the fiscal impacts, but we had different personalities coming and going. So it was trying to build a plane when you're already in a tailspin. So I recognize it was a challenge, but theoretically going forward, normally by the time you get to June, your estimates ought to be pretty spot on and not necessarily off by a million. So I think we need to, as we go forward, we need to be able to scrutinize our budgeting and our budget to actual and forecasting a little better, even on a year-to-year basis.
Yeah.
Sure, and we have a contract to help us with our forecasting, as well as contracts with HDL to help with revenue forecasts. So hopefully combining those two things can help us hone in on a closer to actual projection going forward. So we're definitely aware of that and are working to correct that situation. So if no further comments or questions, I'll move on. Okay.
Please do.
So for current year fiscal 2021 revenues, this analysis is for the first half of the year, so it's through December 31st or period 6. Right now, we're currently operating at a surplus. Our revenue projections for property tax, sales tax, and interest and rents are all near the adopted budget target. Transient occupancy and other taxes are falling short of budget expectations, even after we reduced some of the expectations last year. Fines and forfeitures, licenses and permits, intergovernmental revenues, and charges for services and other revenues are all well outpacing their revenue targets. Generally, transfers in occur near year end, which explains the minimal activity year to date. During the Finance Committee meeting, we discussed potentially changing when those occur. Historically, it had been done more often. So we are looking to implement either quarterly or even more like monthly transfers so that for the budgeting process and seeing where you're at throughout the year, it more closely aligns. So hopefully next year that will no longer be applicable. Next is the timing of key city revenues. So property tax revenues, we received the first installment in December and the second installment in April. For this analysis, we have received December. Sales tax is received, they call it a monthly quarterly. So one quarter is paid in 2 monthly installments. So quarter one is January through March, but you get your monies in May and June. So that's the way that works. We have received 2 quarters of revenues for the sales tax at this time. So, and I also just today received an update from our from HDL, our consultant on sales tax, and they gave us good news on where they expect the sales tax to end up at the end of the year. Transient occupancy tax is due monthly. It's a monthly payment. It's due the last day of the month following the close of the month of activity. So for November, it is due December 31st. We now have HDL performing our collections for transient occupancy tax. So they collect it by that date and then remit it within 15 days of that. And then card room tax is received October, January, April, and a cleanup in June. And that's one area where the other taxes came in lower because we've had the card room closed for a good portion of the pandemic. The 2021 property tax, no immediate COVID-19 impacts. The assessed values reflect events in calendar year 2019, which is before COVID. The assessed valuation grew at, for secured and unsecured, grew at 2.59%, which was lower than the 4% included in the budget, which made a difference of about $117,000. There was a decrease in the number of sales and price reductions, and that's anticipated for next year as well. Residential and industrial were lower growth compared to last year, and you can see compared to the other cities in Napa were slightly lower. Still, we're estimated to come in around 11.3 million for property tax according to this estimate. However, as of December 31st, we're over halfway there, so it's possible that we'll exceed expectations on this as well. For sales tax, we had budgeted 2.2 million. As I said, we received 2 quarters of remittances as of mid-year. If performance continues as is, we would come in slightly under budget at 1.926 million. However, the HDL consultant that I spoke with today and reviewed the reports are estimating it to come in at 2.6 million for this fiscal year, which is 400,000 over budget. They're also projecting about 100,000 growth for next fiscal year. They said that 3Q 2020 was way above estimates, and so we are looking at having a much larger remittance for coming in the next month or two. And then uncertainty remains as COVID-19 continues in California and how that's going to impact our taxes going forward. But we're definitely doing better than when we were in the beginning to middle of our pandemic experience to date of where we were worried it would go. We're definitely performing well above that. For transient occupancy tax, we have a budget of just over $1 million. We've received 4 of 12 months collected as of mid-year, so that's July through October. Those were all due by the end of December, and revenues are running lower than budget. If the current trend continues, actuals will come in around 970,000, which is just over 91% of what we have budgeted. November remittances, I got the amounts today, and it shows that our January payments for November show the trend continuing about the same. Again, if the vaccine rollout occurs as expected, fiscal 21-22 may bring more stability in this area, but it does sound like that probably won't make that difference until after the fiscal year is complete. And then an overview of current year expenditures. Salaries and benefits expenditures were budgeted at approximately 97% of fiscal 19-20 due to anticipated furloughs offset by cost of living adjustments and step increases. And at mid-year, this is under budget. It's at 45%. However, any step increases between now and the end of the year are not considered. So, but we are looking to come in under our budget for salaries and benefits this calendar year. There's also the budgeted positions that have been vacant at different points throughout the year. The city also prepays the unfunded liability at the beginning of the year for the pension, which explains why it's at 85% of usage at mid-year. This is to be expected. Services and supplies, again, the largest expenditure category is at 40% usage, and we're looking to try and make sure that we can come in under budget on that as well. The internal service fees and transfers out, we're working on, and we're going to get some entries in as we move into the budget process so that we have an idea of where they're actually at this time. But there is minimal activity as of December 31st and no capital outlays so far this year. So the budget for this year is in orange. The expenditures are on top and the revenues are on bottom, and the actuals are below it. We are currently at about an $870,000 surplus of revenues over expenditures. But some of that may change as we move into the second half of the year. We will be coming back on February 2nd for mid-year budget adjustments, and we'll have a picture of where the departments feel that they can come in at that time. So this is similar to the overview of 1920. has the adopted budget, our year-to-date as of 12/31. And then I have a percentage column, which is the projected receipts and the projected expenditure for the usage for the year so far. Are there any questions on this current fiscal year's overview? So one final thing, the Finance Committee recommended some changes to the process in future years. We will begin the identification of key performance indicators, reportable trends, and reporting of statistics during our upcoming budget process to help keep the council abreast of where we're at and how we're performing compared to other jurisdictions and compared to our past, and really give a more broad picture of where we're at as a city. We're also going to start identifying new sources of ongoing revenues, such as grant opportunities, growth plans, and incentives to bring growth to American Canyon. And there's other options such as short-term rentals within the scope of transient occupancy taxes, and we're looking for other potential ongoing revenue sources that recur year after year. We're also in the process of improving our 10-year forecast, which I mentioned a little while ago, and have contracted with a consultant to provide the framework and the initial work product. And we'll be incorporating the information we get from our existing consultant on revenue trends for our taxes and things of that nature to help improve our forecast in the near term, and also for more the business cycle implication as well. Thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to add one more thing to the work list that we also talked about, and that is revisiting our capital reserve policy in the context of being able to fund the deferred maintenance of our parks, streets, and other major facilities. That has to be identified. Not that we'll necessarily be able to fund whatever that gap is, but at least identify it and integrate a plan that gets us up to sufficiency.
Yes, that's correct. Vice Mayor Joseph. We also talked about that, so that's part of our thought process too.
Thank you.
Any other comment from City Council?
Yeah, I have a comment and a question for Mr. Bogart, and it's. I know you're new here, and I know you're getting up to speed, and you're probably drinking from a fire hose. But in your opinion, as a financial professional, how are we looking at a city? I mean, I'm looking at those numbers generally, and it seems like we have challenges. But at the same time, it doesn't seem like we're in a dire situation. In your view of our revenue opportunities in the financial picture that you've seen so far, and how it compares to other places that you've worked or seen, can you characterize where we stand today?
Sure, I can give you some idea of what I've seen. So I know a lot of jurisdictions are really suffering through major shortfalls right now, and their revenue projections are not coming in at target. I also know that American Canyon has been proactive by getting the staff to agree to furloughs. You're saving close to 10% in salaries at 20 hours, 8%, 20 hours or 20 days per year, so 20 out of 260, that is in the average work per employee. So that's a large savings. We're working for like the mid-year budget adjustment. We've actually projected out where we think things should be able to come in, and then we're going to have the discussion with the departments to determine if they feel that they can meet that and stick to it, or discuss with us why they feel they need more money, or if they want to shift within their own budget line items. But I did come from Sacramento County, and they also, like American Canyon, were doing better than they expected through the pandemic. But I've been on several conference calls with other jurisdictions, and the coronavirus relief funding didn't cover what they needed as much as they expected. So I feel that the city is weathering the pandemic fairly well, and with some sort of glimmer of hope toward the end of this calendar year of things moving back to more of a normal stance, I feel like we're going to make it through all.
Thank you for the perspective.
Council ready for public comment? Did we receive any on this item?
No public comments.
Okay. All right, well, this item is a receive and file, so the motion's out of effect.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Miriam Abadamos.
Yes.
Councilmember David Oro.
Yes.
Councilmember Pierre Washington.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mark Joseph.
Yes.
Mayor Leon Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Council. Moving on our agenda, we're now at item C3, receive information, provide potential direction regarding term limits for mayor and city council.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item is brought forward at the request of the council. In a prior council meeting, the request was to have a council discussion about the possibility of term limits for council members and or the mayoral position. The staff report outlines our understanding of the history of various voter decisions that have been made in the city's history. Any sort of changes to the makeup of the council as far as qualifications or ability to serve would require voter approval. And in the past, there have been two such instances where that occurred. The staff report also outlines the history of the incumbents of the council individuals and how long you all have served in your respective capacities. At this point, staff invites obviously conversation on the council, and if there's desired action, we're here to serve at the pleasure of the council. That's all we have.
Jason, when you say that, does that mean that we can come up with whatever we want to come up with and then we put it on the ballot? So let's say the council decide. Wait, let me rewind. Are you asking us if we want to consider term limits at a later date, or are you soliciting input right now?
The purpose of this item is to respond to a council request, which, as staff understood it, was to bring an item related to term limits. And so this is very open-ended. There's no action tonight. What we've tried to do is explain our understanding of how the existing situation is, and if there was proposed change from the council, the method by which the council would legally have to do that. At this point, absent any other further direction from the council, staff won't be doing anything. We are just simply tonight responding to a previous council request.
Wait, so if there's an action to change it, it has to go to a vote to the people in a general election?
Correct. So any changes to the composition of the council, meaning the number of council members, the qualifications of those council members, term limits, those sorts of things, are required to go to the voters. Bill, you might want to add a little bit of context of maybe why that is and how that can be done.
I think the concept behind the government code provisions was, as a general law city, the legislature wanted to have uniform rules on council composition. A charter city can provide for that through amendment of its provisions. So, there are examples in the staff report where in past actions, the terms both the terms of the council member and elected mayor were established. So under the enabling authority in the government code is where the authority lies. And if you want to change the terms, or the conditions of the mayor's position or the council position, it is by initiative. What the legislative wisdom is behind that, I think it's quite frankly, to take it away from the council and to give it to the people. It doesn't mean you can't put a measure on the ballot as a council, of course. But I think that's the wisdom that's associated with anything where they require the changes be made by initiative.
Mr.
want the electorate of the body to decide.
Mr. Ross, you were here when the electorate changed it last time. Can you give us a little bit of history of how that came about from a 2 to a 4 year term, how it was discussed in council, and if you have any recollection of how the vote went? Was it an overwhelming majority in 2000? I don't know what the date was.
Well,
2000.
I think part of the argument, if I would, that I recall, was that there would be an efficiency with longer council terms. That was the one that I recall. I don't remember the vote as it being close or not. I can certainly find out about it. But I think the context was having elections every 2 years doesn't make sense. And if you're going to meet the requirement of the government code about staggered positions, meaning 3 one time, 2 the other time, and then you took out the position for the mayor, so you've got to integrate that. I think that was part of the rationale, is people to be effective on council should have 4-year terms as opposed to 2-year terms.
Okay, so sorry, go ahead.
No, and I was going to say the mayor and I were around as well, but I don't know if the history is as critical as comments, so I'll defer.
If I could ask a question real quick, I'm curious that when we say terms, we're talking about the current term that a person that has been elected. I guess I look at the terms as how many terms, if it's a 4-year term, how many times can I run for a 4-year term versus I'm running for a position and I'm in there for 4 years. So, for example, I got on in 2020. The expectation is after 4 years, I can run again. And can I run again after that? And after that. Yes. So that's what I thought the term limit conversation was going to be about this evening. Not how many years that you're actually sitting in office from an elected year.
I think I understand that also, but the question was, what was the rationale behind, I believe it was 2012, that change?
Correct. And so
I think Mark had some rationale that he advanced at that time, if I recall.
Yeah, we're discussing this, and I think context is very important, right? So we're talking about changing the will of the voters here, or bringing forward the will of the voters to change. And I just did a quick search, and it looks like American Canyon residents in 2006 voted to move it from every 2 years to 4, and that measure, it was Measure B at the time, was 75% voting yes. So it seems like it was like a big thing. If I'm reading this correctly, it seems like it was an overwhelming majority of support. So well beyond the 2/3 vote. So just that's something to keep in mind as we start this discussion.
2006 was when we went from a 5 council members and a rotating mayor to a separately elected mayor. And at that time, there was a push. And quite honestly, part of the rationale, and I was a part of that effort, was the idea that the mayor should be providing some independent leadership from staff and provide kind of a vision and be that leader of the community, more so than just the ceremonial role that happens when you're a rotating mayor. But at the same time, it was also a 2-year term. I think about 4 years or 6 years later, there was a second effort that said, a 2-year term for the mayor is is just as bad as a 2-year term for Congress. You're constantly running. And that's when we said, let's go and make the mayor's term 4 years like everybody else's.
Right, and so that was 2012. So what I just said earlier was wrong, and that was for the term. So I just pulled it up really quick. It was 53.29% in favor in
2006 or in 12?
12, from 2 to 4 years.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
So this was this item was requested by me. I believe that we should enact term limits for the city council and for the mayor. I believe I'm in favor of keeping the mayor separately elected, and I think that that would be a separate set of term limits. And what I was hoping for this discussion is what kinds of term limits are out there. I was hoping that, it says in the staff report that a small portion of cities do this. Well, I was hoping to know what kinds of term limits they have set so that we can make a more informed decision as to what our options are. I don't necessarily think that city council term limits need to be the same as the presidential term limits, but I wanted to know what our options are because I do believe that we do need term limits. So.
Yeah, I think within the direction of Mr. Hawley here, it's for us to do, right? We're the council that makes these decisions. I, for one, am not in favor of imposing term limits here. I think it was passed just a short 8 years ago. And this experiment, maybe 9 years ago now, hasn't necessarily run its full course. But what I tend to think is that there's, perhaps some frustration with the lack of change in the mayor's role as of recent, because we've had a long-term mayor, and sometimes you will get that. But to me, that if people wanted a change in the mayor, our most recent mayor, the election wouldn't have 63% voting for him, and it's not necessarily that they're looking for a term limit here. I just don't see that, except outside of a vocal few. If the majority of the people wanted term limits, probably would have voted the current mayor out. And so that's kind of where I stand. And it's not like necessarily this mayor is a strong mayor in terms of the power that they have. He still has to have, or that position still has to have 2 other people to vote with him. It's a 3/5 sort of vote. And I read some of the public comments and talking about, implying some corruption or something like that, and in terms of those things, and those it just seems to be unfounded and sort of hearsay, or just maybe even just concern, or simply as concern. So, generally, that's kind of where I stand. I don't see anything to do that. I know that other municipalities of our size have had long-term mayors, and seem to be okay. And according to the staff report, for a municipality like us, only 15% of cities in the state of California probably have term limits. And I'll add one other thing. It wasn't that long ago that we didn't have too many people running on council, right? I mean, Mr. Joseph went unopposed just a few years ago, ran unopposed. I think we're doing a better job of putting people in, making things more competitive. Certainly in my race, and certainly in this last race, it was like that, and that's what we want to see. And I think we're getting to a point where we're getting into that competitiveness to where we don't have to worry about those term limits. Those are my thoughts and opinions, and the floor is yours.
Well, I'd like to point out that, every election cycle, there's an opportunity to change whoever that elected official is. It's a matter of the public interest in it, their satisfaction with what the governing body, our council in this situation, is doing. I think what we have done to generate more people to be interested in serving, certainly the Citizen Academy, which Councilmember Ken Leary and I worked on, and the council approved, was an opportunity to educate people on how local government works, what are the different elements of it. But likewise, we have very active PTAs in American Canyon. Certainly there's another opportunity. People have migrated from that activity into commission work with the City of American Canyon. Various service clubs likewise have had people step forward for doing that. Other organizations within the city, chambers of commerce, etc. There's ample opportunity for people to step forward if they so desire to fill in that void, and it leaves it up to the voters to determine. Term limits to me are artificially imposed, and I think really the vote ought to be coming from the people. I'm speaking there as that one person who's been now serving in my 6th term as mayor. 3 of them were 2-year terms, and it was changed to 4-year. It's been an honor to do that. Certainly I am very cognizant and concerned with the voices from American Canyon and folks out there who are concerned about our city. This last election cycle, people were, well, the conversation I'm having where people were satisfied with how things were going in American Canyon. Oftentimes I would, Ken, Larry, and I used to do a Friday bicycle ride when the weather was good. We have a rather controversial issue before the city council, and a lot of people were coming in expressing dissatisfaction with that. So we ride around the community and run into folks and how do you think we're doing? What do you think with that meeting? Oh, Tyson, we're doing a great job. So by and large, folks who are content, satisfied with that are less vocal, and that's understandable. Those who have issues, certainly we want to hear it. That's important to our discord and discussion in terms of addressing issues in American Canyon. But I think the thing for me to remember and to pass on is people have a choice every election cycle. They do. They can put together their candidate. They have done it every year. I've always had an opponent in every race I run, and this time was no exception. And I give it to my opponent, who ran a very good campaign indeed. And but the voters ultimately made that decision who they wanted to elect as mayor, or who they wanted to elect as city council member, and that's what I would put forward for our consideration. You know, let the people make their own decisions about who they want representing them.
So I want to respond to what Councilmember Oro said. Councilmember Oro just said that this is coming out of a frustration over the mayor race. If you recall, in 2016, when I had just begun running for city council for the first time in my life, I was talking about term limits. When I was elected to the city council in 2016, I asked for term limits. I asked for them again the following year. I asked for them every year since I've been elected. And the last time I asked for them, Councilmember Oro, you said, I don't want to turn this into a political issue. We have an imminent election. And I believe you just turned it into a political issue. So please do not put words in my mouth and do not try to explain my intention. My intention for asking for term limits is because, and let me be clear, by asking for term limits, I am not asking to take away the will of the people. I am giving them an opportunity to decide whether they want term limits or not. So by us putting it on a ballot, we are not taking anything away from anybody. We're giving them an opportunity. My intention for asking for term limits is because everybody knows that it is extremely difficult to beat an incumbent, not because the incumbent is necessarily doing an amazing job, but because the incumbent has built name recognition, has built a network of funders, and that's why people assume that corruption comes in when someone has been in office for several years. That's number one. Number two, and I'm not saying that there is corruption, I'm saying that's one of the reasons why people assume that there is corruption. Number two, when someone remains in the same position for several years, regardless of whether it's mayor, council member, director of a nonprofit, they become stagnant. They no longer have fresh ideas, but they will still continue to get elected because of their name recognition and because of the fact that they've built up these networks of funding and they have money in their pocket and they can do the campaigning. And frankly, the first time I ran in 2016, I had to work my butt off to get my name recognition to win. And in 2020, when I ran for the second time, I didn't have to work nearly as hard and I didn't have to raise nearly as much money because the name recognition was already there. I'm pretty sure Councilmember Washington can attest to that as well, as he had to run twice in order to get elected. And the second time, the incumbent decided not to run. So we were able to get a new perspective and fresh blood on the city council. That's my intention, is to keep it fresh and do what's best for the city and allow people the opportunity to decide whether they believe we need term limits or not. Not to take anything away from anybody, and not because I'm frustrated with the election of the mayor from last time. Thank you.
So, thank you. Appreciate your passion there, Councilmember Alvadamas. let me just be clear. I never mentioned your name or said it was coming from you. I was reading this all across, okay? And that is the fact of the matter is. And we're looking at this holistically. I'm sorry, I'm speaking right now. Thank you. If we're looking at this holistically, that is what we're looking at. And to claim that, you know, it wasn't political, we're not in an election cycle now like when you brought it up last time. However, this is a political thing no matter what we do. As soon as you start to begin to talk about it, it becomes a political thing. So that seems like a nonsensical comment to me. However, I hear you. I just feel that, you know, a little bit differently about it. And I think the will of the people is chosen every single time. And again, I'll reiterate that it wasn't that too long ago that we actually voted on this. And I think it's premature for the council to take this up again in such a short period of time.
Councilmember Oro, we did not.
I'd like to.
We voted on extending the terms that people are in office, which is a very different issue.
No, the term.
And I'd like to add
was the term in office for that, right? So it was the terms in office, the length of time. Yeah, you are correct in that. But at the same time, I don't think there's a reason for term limits right now. Nonetheless,
Chair Washington, Councilman Washington, you want to address?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to mention that I also support term limits. It was something that I mentioned earlier in my campaigns as well. I actually believe that it allows for new, fresh voices, and I agree that sometimes going against incumbents is very difficult. From talking to people in the community, the people feel as though that, you know, why run? Because I don't know all the issues. I can't get all the issues. And that discourages a lot of people. And I'd be the first to say that I think term limits allows us as elected officials a window of opportunity to cash in on what we promised we're going to do and see it through. I always talk about matrix. I always talk about measuring what we say we're going to do. And if you can't do it within in my opinion, within 2 terms, it's time for someone else to come in. And I've always felt that way. I think that even in our presidential election, it's very apparent. If there were no term limits there, it'd be crazy. So I would move forward with it. I like to hear what the people in the community have to say. And I think there's no harm in putting a measure for the citizens and the residents of American Canyon to vote on. There is a 2 different. That's why I say early on in the beginning, we were talking about going from 2 to 4 years as a term. We're not talking about just a term. We're talking about how many times can you run in a term. So the term limits to me is a 4-year term, which has already been extended. You do get to do that twice. And if you can't do what you say you're going to do within that window, it's time to move on to bigger and better things.
And I'd like to weigh in a little bit as well. I am also willing to look at term limits, but to be honest, some of the comments we've received from residents have raised some very good points. So that I guess for me, before we decide on a ballot measure, we ought to explore whether it should be 2 terms or 3 terms. An argument was made that 3 terms might make more sense. There was some suggestions about eliminating the separately elected mayor, go back to the way it used to be, where it's rotating. There have been some other suggestions. So I think, although I support the concept of term limits, I also would like to review some of the suggestions and ideas, kind of go through the pros and cons, and think about it a little bit so that, you know, we have a more reasoned approach. And as far as I know, unless there's going to be a special election in the near future, whatever we decide to do, we have something like, you know, a year and a half to figure it out. So even if we do move forward with it, I think we should spend a little bit of time, maybe solicit input from the residents, maybe have an ad hoc committee or do something to explore some of the details so that we can come up with, you know, a proposal that we know has some public support. So that's where I'm coming from.
Council ready for public comment on the matter? Hearing no objection. We We have public comment on this matter. I believe we have received some emails. Is anybody willing to verbally express public comment?
Hi, yes, Mayor. We received a written public comment from Joe Chuck, which we're not reading into the record, but it will be made available. We received a public comment from Karina Savante, who is present, Jason Kishnoff, who is present, Tammy Wong, she is not present, and Cindy Biederman, she is present. Karina Savante will be our first public comment. Hi, Karina.
Hello. Thank you for having me. My last name is Serventi.
Serventi.
No, Serventi. Thank you. No problem. Thank you so much.
Good evening. Welcome.
Thanks. So good evening, Mayor, council members, and staff. I would like to give you my comment. I sent you an email, but when I heard it wouldn't be read, I decided to, instead of going to bed, read it myself. So I want to let you know why our term limit's good for our city of American Canyon. One, incumbents are less able to use the city's institutions to manipulate elections or erode the power of rival branches of political adversaries. Two, leaders feel more pressure to deliver results and leave office with a positive legacy. Three, individuals, no matter how powerful and popular, cannot become indispensable. Four, political transitions are normal, regular, predictable events, so rival parties have little incentive to upset the system through other means. And five, the need to change leadership encourages a rising generation of political leaders, fresh ideas, and possible policy changes. I also would like to, I have 3 minutes, right?
Yes, you have 1 minute left, 1 minute and 57 seconds.
Thank you. I also would like to say that it's not about elections every 2 years. That vote, I feel like it's that comment from Council Oro, it's possibly getting people more confused. This is not what this is about. This is about having a 4-year term for 2 or 3 terms. It depends on what you guys decide. I agree with 3 terms, 3 4-year terms. I think that's enough. I don't think that we need folks to be there. And nothing against the mayor. I love Leon. So nothing against you, Leon, or anyone else. But it's just, you know, we just need fresher ideas. The other thing is, you know, let the people choose. You're saying the people chose back in 2012. Let the people choose again. We have a lot more people. It's 2021. You're gonna see the census coming up. There's a lot more people now in town. A lot of different ideas. Let us choose. Thank you, and have a good night, and thanks for all you do, all of you. Thanks.
Okay. Our next speaker, public comment, is Cindy Biederman. Hi, Cindy.
Good evening. How are you guys?
Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. As you guys received my letter, I understand that. I'm just going to kind of hit some points, and plus, thank you for the conversation you guys are having. First, I want to sincerely thank Councilmember Washington and Joseph and Abdudamas for thinking outside of yourself. for thinking of the people. That I truly appreciate. Instead of, we do have rights, or Mr. Earl talks about taking our rights away, but putting this up to vote is giving me a right here, and I appreciate that. And contrary to Mr. Earl's belief, this is not a new concept about term limits. I was voting in 2012, I was voting in 2006, and that was to extend the 2-year. Poor mayor at that point in time, whoever it was at that time, of course, was Leon. Every 2 years, he's got a campaign. That gets to be expensive, and doesn't even give time for anybody to even try to learn the job. So that's what that was about. We're mixing apples and oranges, and we're dealing with, one particular fruit tonight, I guess. Even Thomas Jefferson, that's what I sent you guys. This is to prevent every danger which might arise to American freedom from continuing too long in office. It is earnestly recommended that we set obligation on the holder of that office to go out after a certain period. It keeps the people in power in check. It does allude to, if they're saying on the one topic that I wrote to you guys about studies, it does increase the ratio of competitive elections. It brings in more opportunities to serve in public office. It also allows for more minorities and women to enter the political sphere. Curbs the influence of lobbyists. Term limits will produce a citizen legislative and more ordinary people rather than professionalism politics. Term limit representatives would be more in harmony with the public opinion and with their district constituents. You guys ride your bikes, you guys go talk to the people, but you're not hitting all the people. I don't think you're all in touch with all the constituents. I completely agree with the reasonings that they stated. I also believe that mayor and council, not just mayor, term limits would lessen the potential of abuse by incumbents who stay too long in their positions. The community within the city of American Canyon has a history of community collaboration. The collaboration of the community is the true foundation in which the city of American Canyon is built on. However, over the years, the collaboration between the city and the community has waned. On many levels, the community has been pushed out. I think term limits will facilitate the community regaining their voice. I would further support going back to when the mayor was selected amongst the council on a yearly basis. Although no one council member, including the mayor, is to have more power or influence than the other, it no longer seems to hold truth. Perhaps if we return to the yearly mayor selection, all the elected council will remain in touch with the community who elects them. They will collaborate better as a team and band together for the betterment of all who reside in American Canyon, not just those votes that they seek. Give us that chance. Put it on the ballot. Because we all know another area for us to be able to get this on the ballot is if the people collect the signatures. There is talk amongst the tongue. If you guys are checking with your people, there is talk about term limits. It's not because of the past election. It's just because it's time. Our city is growing. Let us become involved. Let the community back in and let us start helping out. This is a city that we all live in. We have a voice. And all due respect, not allowing people for you to read these comments is just another way of censoring us. It's just another way of saying, hey, let's shut us down. When we want to speak, you want to set a meeting, that's what you always keep telling us. Now we have an easier way. I'm cooking dinner, was the original public comment. Let us speak. Listen to us, please. And thank you again for thinking outside yourself, you guys. I appreciate it. And again, have a great new year. Have a safe, for sure.
Jason Kishnoff logged off, so there are no other public comments.
Okay. We'll close public comment at this time. We'll turn to council for further discussion, decide action.
Mr. Mayor, may I call out something? And so anybody who knows me, I'm going to admit when I am wrong. And I believe I conflated two different issues. And I wanted to thank the resident Karina Sorrente for pointing that out, the two issues. So everybody's clear. There's an extension of the mayor's term from 2 to 4, and now we're looking at the extension of, or putting on limits of the number of times to be reelected. So apologies if that was conflated in any way for the public out there. But in terms of moving forward here, if we're going to go down this route, and I think and you want to bring this to the voters, we may be a little bit myopic here, okay? And before I begin into that next section, I want to remind folks that, our neighbor to the north, Napa, had a very successful mayor that served 4 terms. Why is 2 or 3 a good number? Why couldn't it be more, right? And so it begins to it's almost a slippery slope. I do take a bit of offense to suggest that I am not here for the will of the people, and that I am sequestering folks' voices. Every 2 years in this town, people vote for a council member or a mayor, and they have that voice. And in no way have I ever gotten in the way of that. In fact, I have encouraged it. And to suggest that I am not here speaking on behalf of the people or representing the people of American Canyon is highly offensive. It really is a difference of opinion, and it is a policy issue that we are making here, not anything in terms of impediment of freedom of speech. So be careful how that is chosen in terms of how we're having these discussions, because I think every one of us here took an oath of office to defend the Constitution of the United States and the state of California. And to suggest anything otherwise of me is highly offensive. Now, that being said, I taking a position here, we're talking about term limits. Well, if we're going to bring this to the people, and I said this earlier, I used the word myopic, that is just one way to look at it. Do we bring term limits to council members as well, right? I mean, this was an action for the mayor's position, or do we do it for all of the council members? And again, I caution you on this because as much as people want to say they want to get involved, and I think many of us on council have tried to get other people involved, many people are always hesitant and aren't there. But also, what about districts? If people are saying that we're growing, why aren't we looking at districts? Why aren't we creating districts on the east side, west side, south side of town, right? And so if you're going to bring this to the voters, then you need to bring them more than just this, and also think about that. And I think while we've been talking about term limits, we ought to be thinking about bigger things if you guys are wanting to go down this route. So, and I think that, a lot of this, I think, is what I heard today from the comments is about equitability and participation of constituencies. Districts might be the way to do that.
We have a system currently that does work. I've been out many, many times during election cycles, either my own or others, trying to encourage people who I think have the capacity to serve from their history of community involvement to run for office. In American Canyon, it's a big challenge to find people to step up. Actually, I appreciate the comment about Mayor Jill Jekyll in Napa. Was very much valued and appreciated by the community for all her service. But in election cycles there with the district elections, difficult to find people to run for that. So I would fall back on my earlier comment. Look, we have a system that works. If you want a different person in my office, then you get behind that person and you support them in their campaign and you talk to a lot of people and get them to vote. If you want to change the city council position, go out and talk to a lot of people, get a candidate, get behind them, support them, knock on a lot of doors, talk to a lot of people, get the votes. This system works. Anything further for direction for staff?
I think at this point, I would go back to where I started originally, and that is I think we need to explore it more. I think we've gotten a lot of issues that need to be examined in more detail, specifically how many terms, if there's a limit, 2 terms, 3 terms, do we have a rotating mayor or a separately elected, do we look at districts, and do we look at the prospect of allowing you to go, in other words, a gap in service resets the clock, if you will. I'm not saying any of them that I'm for or against, but there are a lot of good ideas that we've gotten from comments from citizens, and we ought to look into that and explore it before we decide where we want to go. I do think there's a compelling case to put term limits? Because like it,
And they target the discount rate, that's the interest they're earning at 7%. It was only 4.6. So if that trend continues, there's going to be some major hurt out there. Maybe this is just more COVID related. The sooner we get past this, the better the local economy points out. Looking at our economic report, financial report from the American Canyon, we seem to be better straits than probably other jurisdictions that are being more impacted by that. Reflecting the fact that I think last time we checked in on the hospitality side of our economy, it's about 15% of American Canyon. You go north of here in North County, it's like 70%. So this compliance issue with it in Sacramento is now out of the purple zone into the red now. How did that happen and why? There seems to be an awful lot of unanswered questions around how did you get to this decision? What data are you counting? You know, why are some establishments okay to go and some are not? So that's the continuing discussion on it. Encouraging to see though the vaccine being available. Certainly county mental health public health is very involved with trying to, St. Leda Hospital now is a big source for doing vaccines. The individual hospitals and your healthcare provider, Kaiser, for example, has a supply as well. And the age requirement now is down to 65 and older. And certainly people with pre-existing conditions are also eligible for that. And that would conclude for me this evening. So, Councilmember Joseph, future agenda items.
just a couple. First, I know the Parks and Community Services Commission discussed the community gardens. Is that something that will come to the council for formal action or not? That's more of a question than a future topic, maybe.
You know, that's a really good question. And I don't know the answer to it. My understanding of the conversation the other night was it was talking about an existing policy. I don't think direction was given, or at least advice was given about changing the policy. So I don't know that it would come to council. But let me check in, with our team and figure out if there's something that would come back to council.
Okay. The two issues then would be, number one, as I mentioned earlier, there needs to be some discussion about fueling stations and trying to anticipate whether there should be some different changes to the text of our zoning ordinances as it relates to fueling stations versus gas stations. And then secondly, we're getting a lot of complaints about racing on some of the streets. Actually, a couple nights ago, I was hearing a lot of it. I'd like to have our police chief come back or somebody come back with some strategies. I know we can't have a cop everywhere at every minute, but looking at the possibility of surveillance cameras or other types of techniques, enforcement techniques. So I would make a motion that we ask the police chief to report on what's going on with the kind of racing and loud vehicle noises or things related to that. Or if it dies for lack of a second, never mind. But I did just think it's something we should try to explore.
Couldn't we cover that? Oh well, it should have covered it in management reports, but I guess we're not there. So.
Just let the chief know that. Well, I guess he's on this meeting. I think we're getting a lot of complaints. I don't know what the answer is. But I just want to reflect the fact that there's a lot of residents who are frustrated, and I share some of their frustration. So whatever we can do, any ideas, that would be appreciated.
We have an issue every now and then with sideshows also. If you see the tire.
Chief Ortiz was able to swing in here. Do you have any immediate thoughts, Chief Ortiz?
Unmute your microphone.
Rookie move. I do. Just quick, I have gotten some emails forwarded to me and also sent directly to me, and some messages on social media platforms complaining about, well, two things, complaining about speeders and also the very loud exhaust. So I did talk to one of the motor officers today, and then I sent an email to the one that's not working today, and then the supervisor. And we're going to look at kind of ratcheting up our enforcement of modified exhausts. It's not hard to do. Any modification to the factory exhaust is a citation and is punishable by a fine. And then the decibel readers is we're going to explore maybe buying a decibel reader, not very cost prohibitive, to ratchet up that enforcement. And then speeding, it's like all the other speeding complaints. We just kind of make a note of it, of where it's at, and we strategize our patrol day. Beyond that, I was going to talk to the supervisor about doing some more. We did it I think it's been a couple of months now, kind of a maximum enforcement day where we get extra radar operators and just kind of focus a certain window of time and just, get a lot of traffic enforcement beyond just the 2 motor officers. Using 5 or 6 officers to really kind of clamp down for a couple of hours. So we're going to revisit that plan and come up with a strategy. The sideshow issues, just to clarify, we don't have the closest thing we ever had to a sideshow was a Vallejo, a sideshow that was kind of whack-a-mole moving around Vallejo. It made its way to Corcoran and Flosden for a brief moment, and that was actually a sideshow with a lot of cars, a lot of spectators. That's the only sideshow that's ever touched our jurisdiction. Somebody getting reckless with their car by themselves and spinning donuts, that's not a sideshow. We do see some rings of donuts, and especially along American Canyon Road on the west side. And so that's dangerous and reckless behavior. We're just trying to find it and catch it, but it's not a spectator sport, so to speak, like what a sideshow. Okay. And the thing is the drag racing, that's 2 people kind of getting to a finish line. We get people throw, we hear these terms, there's drag racing going on at this strip of road. When it's going on, we need to know about it. Somebody should call and not send a Facebook message because we don't monitor that 24/7. But it's different between drag racing and just speeding in general. So trying to clarify on one message we got, was there 2 people actually racing like for pink slips or for a contest, or was it just fast cars? So sometimes we be careful with terminology.
That's what I was going to say, Chief. You mentioned that you are going to talk to some officers about having extra officers on duty. But these drag races usually happen at night, and they are usually on American Canyon Road on the west side of town. And I know we've had issues with that before, and ramped up enforcement, got rid of it for a while, but it's back. And whenever I'm at my parents' house, I can hear it. It's there. So maybe more evening radar patrols. Just to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's always helpful to know times of day, because sometimes we just get generic complaints and then we try to follow up. Every time we get those, we try to follow up with the person giving us the message and saying, okay, do you have thank you for reaching out, because it's always good to have an involved citizenry helping us do our job. But those windows of time are gold, because then we can know when to ramp up the enforcement and bring the extra officers. That, even if it's a 2-hour window, but that's really very, very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Chief Ortiz, what's the phone number somebody should call? We don't necessarily want them calling 911, right? If somebody's hearing tonight, we go home and someone's hearing speeding out there on West American Canyon, what's a good phone number?
So a good non-emergency number. First of all, not Facebook message, because that's not, so we've seen that a little bit.
Phone number.
A phone number, please, and it's 707-253-4451. That's the non-emergency dispatch center, 253-4451.
Thank you.
Okay, anything further on future agenda items, discussion? Well, council, thank you very much. We have concluded our business for the evening. Very spirited discussion this evening. Much appreciate everybody's input. We are now adjourned. Good night.
Good night.
All right.